Hello and welcome back. We're working on Sabotage, and now it's time for us to start keeping score of how many things we shot down and how many shots we've taken. So we're going to start by selecting Game Object and going to the UI menu and selecting Text Mesh Pro. And you'll probably get this pop-up the first time, and it wants to install some essentials, so we'll hit Import Essentials. When it's done, you close that window, and you should end up in your hierarchy with a canvas and a text TMP object and an event system. We're going to change the text TMP to score. So when you first create the text object, you'll probably see a giant text box covering over most of the screen when your play area is really small. Well, we need to change the coordinate system of the canvas, that's the parent, to the camera's coordinate system. So select canvas in the hierarchy, and then over on the right where you see render mode, change screen space overlay to screen space camera. And then select the render camera and go to scene and select main camera. You should see that the canvas has shrunk down to the size of the game field. Let's double click on main camera and get it back into the scene. So here's the text box that we created, and we need to move it onto the building. That's where we're going to show the score. So select score, drag it over so that it's centered. I'm going to zoom in here. So we'll zoom in to get a better view. I'm going to use the rect tool to adjust the rectangle of the text object. So after we've changed the text box to match the building's billboard there, you'll notice that the text is not visible. It's actually being covered by the building. We need to change the rendering order so that the text will show up on top of the billboard. To do that, we go to the canvas object, which is holding the score. We go to the canvas renderer, and we go to sorting layer. Right now it's set to default. Let's add a sorting layer, and we will add a foreground. Then we go back to canvas, and that sorting layer we will change it from default to foreground. Now the text is showing up in front of the billboard. The text is still really big, so we need to change the font size so that it fits into the billboard. So we go to the score object and we scroll down to the Text Mesh Pro option, and where it says new text, I'm going to put 4 zeros just to give us some idea of the size for the score. Then at the font size, I'm going to change it to one that fits. 18 seems to do well. Right now the text is justified to the left, so we need to center it. Under the alignment panel, we'll click on the center button, and the text now shows up in the center. So this is perfect for keeping track of our score. Now, out of all the objects which we have on the scene, the one object that talks to almost everything else is the air traffic controller. So let's make it in charge of keeping track of the score. So I'm going to go to the air traffic controller, and I'm going to edit the script. So the air traffic controller needs an object to point to the scoreboard, and it's going to have to keep track of the score. In the start function, we'll set the score to 0. So we've added a function into the air traffic controller to add a value to the score. A negative value can also be added so that it reduces the score. If the score goes below 0, we'll force it to 0. This line right here will turn score into a string and place it into the score object's Text Mesh Pro text field. So every time the add score gets called, we'll update the scoreboard. Now we just need to get the other objects to call the air traffic controller and update their score. So the first object to update is the cannon. Select cannon from the scene and go to the cannon controller and edit the script. So the cannon controller is going to have access to the air traffic controller if it wants to update the score. So here's the variable to keep track of it. So in the shoot bullet function inside the cannon, we're going to have it call the air traffic controller and add a -1 to the score. The next object that needs to add to the score is the helicopter. So select helicopter prefab. We'll edit the helicopter controller script. The helicopter controller already has an object for the air traffic controller. So in the helicopter controller, we modify the check collision portion of the code and have it add 5 points to the score. And finally, we need to modify the trooper prefab. So select the trooper and go to the trooper controller and edit the script. So in the trooper controller, we also need the air traffic controller object so we can update the score. But remember, this is a prefab and we can't assign something from the scene to a prefab. So we have to add the routine into the start function to find the air traffic controller by using its tag. The trooper has 3 ways to die, so we need to call the add score routine in 3 places. The first one is when we squish from falling too fast. The next is if we collide with a bullet. And finally, the third is if we have a trooper falling on us. So let's switch to Unity and see how this works. Before I run the game, I'm going to go to the score and remove all the zeros except 1. Select the air traffic controller from the scene, and under score object, let's assign it to the score text box. We need to go to the cannon object on the scene and assign the air traffic controller object to the cannon. The prefab helicopter and the prefab trooper will get the air traffic controller by using the tag. Okay, let's see what happens. The score is going up. And every time I shoot a bullet, it goes down. Okay, the scoreboard works. In the original game of Sabotage, the game is over when you have 4 troopers on either side of the building. Right now, we are just dropping the troopers at random places, including on top of the building. So we need to add some functionality that prevents the troopers from falling directly onto the building. The helicopter controller determines where the troopers are falling. So let's edit that code. In the helicopter controller, we made some changes to the setup of the trooper. After it picks the payload position, we then check to see if it's within the building's range, and we adjust it so that it's just outside. If it's in the positive direction, we make the maximum value either 0.8 or the current position. If it's in the negative direction, we make the minimum value either negative 0.8 or the current payload position. This will exclude the building's range. Let's give it a quick try. Well, after running this a few minutes, we pretty much verified that the troopers are not landing on the building. Now we need to check for a game end condition. Again, the best place for this is in the air traffic controller. So back to the air traffic controller script. In the air traffic controller, we'll create a Boolean flag to signify when the game is ended. And in the start routine, we'll set it to false, because we just started. In the update routine, I've put the check for game end as part of the launch timer, so it's not checking every single frame, just every so often. I have the instantiate check to see if the game is not ended. If the game is ended, then there's no need to create more helicopters. So in the air traffic controller, we will check for a game end. We look to see if the trooper's on the ground. If he's still in the air, then he could still be shot down. So we look at the X position of the trooper, and if he's less than 0, we'll add 1 to the left count. Otherwise, we'll add 1 to the right count. After going through all the troopers, we will look at the left count or the right count to see if either of them are greater than 3. If they are, then the game's over. We select true for the game end boolean. Let's give this a try. So as soon as the 4th trooper lands on the ground, no more helicopters should be coming out. There we go. Now that we have the code for detecting the end of the game, we really needed an earth-shattering kaboom to be the finale. But we're not going to do that this episode. We'll save that for next episode. So I hope you like this. If you do, please subscribe. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.